All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out the program before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. We're going to be talking about space, UFOs, and all kinds of stuff today. I have on the studio line with me a co-host today, Asherz. How are you doing? Welcome to the program. I'm glad to have you.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to talk about space.
Good. It's one of my favorite topics. I really enjoy talking about it. I think one of the reasons why people are kind of interested in life that's somewhere else out there is, I think, would you agree with this as a humanitarian, let's say, that human existence is kind of a lonely one? I mean, it's kind of one where we're longing for company. Is that true or not?
I agree. Yeah, it's why we couple, with other humans. It's why we have pets. I think that we're constantly looking for companionship. We're pack animals. That's natural.
Sure. She has a really good, interesting bio on her Twitter account. She says, "Weirdo from Ohio." Okay, check. I'm the same way. Canton Hall of Fame right here.
They breed them. I don't know. It's just something about the state.
And a cryptozoologist. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that because I'm not sure what that is. A UFOologist, I know what that is. Paranormal investigator and a filmmaker. Oh, that's really cool. Okay. And then you have on here sometimes model, full-time witch. Okay. Let's start with a cryptozoologist. What exactly is that?
Yeah. So cryptozoology is the study of basically undiscovered species of animals that have a lot of anecdotal evidence, but no scientific evidence to back them. So you're talking Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, a lot of these creatures that live here that are terrestrial that we haven't exactly proven yet, but people say exist.
Okay. Is there one that you have, I don't know, an inkling that there might be something? Is there one in particular that you think, this might be true?
A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of them. There's quite a few. Bigfoot's probably the most popular.
Yeah.
Just where I'm at in my career and just in my research and just being somebody that was an enthusiast all through my childhood. I don't need convincing that the thing's real. I know it is. So.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. A UFOologist, that kind of speaks for itself. We'll get into that. Paranormal investigator. So are you like one of these people, like, what was it, poltergeist, when somebody has a problem or whatever, they call you and you come over and investigate it? Is that what that is, or is that something else?
No, I have. When it comes to paranormal investigations, you'd really be surprised to find out how much that and the ufology go hand in hand. So it's kind of something that I've picked up along the way because it does seem relevant to what I study. So I don't put it on my Twitter bio. When I give a lecture, though, I do tell people I'm a Fortean investigator. Fortean. It's a term that came about from Charles Fort, who's kind of your granddaddy of weird. He was kind of one of the first journalists that, and kind of researchers that dug into all of this weird stuff. And so to kind of follow along with that, you have this term nowadays that nobody knows about, but it just means that I study and investigate everything that's beyond conventional science. So.
Oh, well, that's great. A lot of times I sometimes get described as a skeptic, and I probably am, but I think one of the words that often gets misused in the common vernacular is that a skeptic is somebody who's automatically going to try to refute something. And that's not the case at all.
Right.
For me, I need some evidence to go on. And until then, I don't try to, argue with anyone. I think Einstein once said that, don't be too quick to dismiss something, because that's the first step toward making a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very true. And I think there's probably one of the things that's that's convinced me a little bit, or at least made me wonder, is I've talked to a lot of hospice nurses, and there seems to be a strange consistency that happens when someone is dying. They all tell the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, that's not conclusive proof that someone is crossing over or what
Sure.
have you, but it's hard to ignore it. So I'm very open to the idea that there is a spiritual realm. Now, is that kind of what you operate in, or am I wrong about that?
I would say you're wrong. So here's the part that's
Okay.
going to blow your mind, and everybody's
Okay.
listening. I also am a skeptic,
Mhm.
and so it's the things that I can't come up with any kind of explanation that really gets me going.
Mhm.
So I'm controversial. Don't believe ghosts are dead people. People get mad when I say that.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily know what happens to us when we die. One of the things I have studied is like near death experiences and kind of what
Mhm.
happens before people die. One thing that happened to me personally in my life, my grandmother, a couple, like about 2.5 months before she had passed, she had seen aliens frequently,
Mm.
which is not something she had ever talked about ever her entire life. I think that most of this phenomena that happens is, again, as I said, it related. And some people call it different things. Some people call it ghosts. Some people call it demons. Some people spirits. Some people aliens. I prefer the term ultra terrestrial, which was something coined by researcher and ufologist John Keel. It just basically means entities that have mastered different dimensions beyond what we have. They live here. Sometimes they don't live here. Sometimes they travel to the other side of the universe. We don't know what they're capable of. We're not capable of that, right? We don't really
Yeah.
quite understand it, which is why there's people like me who's trying to kind of further understanding it just a little bit better. So
Yeah. And I would tell the audience there's a lot of scientific basis for this concept.
absolutely.
For example, we're going to talk about this supposed disclosure. If you
Yeah.
haven't found out about it, I believe his last name is David Grush. I could be saying that wrong, but he gave an extensive interview on News Nation,
Mhm.
and he was somebody who apparently they verified he did work high up in intelligence for the United States government, and he says, he makes some disclosures that the United States government has found these craft, and there's been what amounts to dead pilots found in some of them. And here again, I as a skeptic, I would have to say that's great. I'm very interested in this.
Sure.
However, um, I believe Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and we just don't have something extraordinary yet. But
Right.
getting back to what Asherz was talking about, one of the things he mentions is he calls them not so much aliens, but he calls them non-humans. I watched a good
Mhm.
portion of that interview, and it was a long one.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons he says that is because there is evidence, for example, especially if you study quantum and some of these other things in physics, there is the possibility that there could be dimensions
Mhm.
that are essentially right where we are. So these conceivably could be beings that they're terrestrial. They're here with us. They're just in another dimension. Is that something that you kind of lean toward?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I became a professional weirdo, I
Mm.
was a normal person,
Yeah,
and I went to college, and I am a proud college dropout. I chose motherhood over school, but I went to school
sure,
for astrophysics. That's what I was going for,
awesome.
and I've highly considered going back just to get the little piece of paper, just to show people, hey, look, I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit. But I didn't get into that because of anything weird. I just got into it because it just happened to be that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to get into. Mostly because, theories in physics are really interesting. And, there's some
Hmm.
crazy stuff out there that people don't even like realize.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the whole point of it. A lot of my research, a lot of what I think these things are, A lot of what I think this is all pointing to is tied really intricately into string theory,
Yeah.
which is, if people don't know, it's just basically the concept of dimensional awareness throughout, where we live. And dimensions aren't what people think they are. It's not like Rick and Morty, where you shoot a portal, and then you walk through it. It's like walking through a door. It's not like that at all. Dimensions are like, it's kind of like having extra senses. So imagine that you are deaf, right? You can't hear. You can experience the world in all these other types of ways, touch and taste and, sight and all these different ways, but you just can't hear. That's basically what dimensions are, except for on different levels. And I'm not going to run the gauntlet on string theory because it gets really confusing and really hard to understand. Some people have made amazing YouTube videos to try to explain it. But after about the fifth dimension is explained to you, your brain just kind of melts because you're not meant to get it. We don't get it. We're third dimensional. We don't get the fifth dimension. But like one thing you can say for a quick example is time. It's the fourth dimension. It's the mastery of time, essentially. So if we as humans, people talk about time travel, if we ever really did perfect time travel, we would instantaneously evolve from a third dimensional creature to a fourth dimensional creature because we currently cannot master traveling through time. We can't, we can't really perceive time except for on a linear basis. So anyway, that is, like I said, I think a lot of these things are just different skill sets of creatures. And I think that explains why some of them are so wildly different from each other, mastering different types of dimensions that we cannot perceive or comprehend or understand correctly.
That's really good. A really good way to put that. And I know a lot of people that might be listening may only be mildly interested in this.
Sure.
But I do think that you're putting it in a way that people can understand that it is reasonable on some level, that this is something that can't be just dismissed. So that's, that's really some cool thinking there. I presume you did you see the movie Interstellar or something? You
Yes,
most certainly have. Okay. A lot of the things that she's referring to in regard to time and everything are shown in that movie in a way that I think is pretty accurate in terms of science. It's obviously science fiction movie, but they illustrate some of these things in a way that they do keep the principles pretty much intact. Now, you're also a filmmaker. What kind of films do you like to do? I know you're a horror fan, so do you do those?
So I don't actually. I'm a documentary filmmaker.
Okay.
So when you're researching, investigating this stuff, nobody pays you to do that. So you have to make content, right? And not just you have to make content. Honestly, I started backwards. I started in this field because I wanted to make a documentary. I didn't have any film experience. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even have a smartphone at the time. That's how bad it was. This was 2019. I didn't have a smartphone. Yeah. And so I started from nothing. And then I created a social media presence outside of that because I was like, well, damn, you guys, if I make a documentary, nobody's going to know who I am. What I didn't know at the time was that it's actually really difficult to document an ongoing investigation. And so I don't have my first film out yet. It is, God, it's so close. It's so close to being finished. But the first one's about the Mothman. So kind of, people kind of know me as the Mothman lady. I've got other ones that I do along the way. So I'm just filming as I'm investigating, as I'm going out and doing this research, as I'm talking to witnesses. I'm filming it all in the process. And so there's different concepts, yet to come. Mothman was kind of a different thing. It's almost done. I've got a window areas documentary about just different areas of high strangeness that happen to just attract that kind of stuff. All kinds of fun stuff in the works. I'm trying to go to Skinwalker Ranch next year. So it's, I'm very busy.
Yes. Well, you sound like you got a lot of really great interests. So I really wanted to set that up.
Sure.
And you have such a good foundation for what you're doing. A lot of it is very much rooted into well-established theories and concepts. So
yes.
Getting back to the UFOs, there's a lot of talk about it now. And on the one level, we could, when you talk about people skipping, I say people, but beings
Sure.
skipping dimensions and all that, that can be pure conjecture, let's say, in terms of we don't know what those life forms would be like. We don't know if it's something that we could relate to or not. We're not
Right.
even sure that they're carbon based. They could be any number of things, silicon and some other things. So I'll kind of put that aside.
Sure.
Let me ask you this: in terms of some sort of biological life that we can relate to, okay, some sort of a being that is close enough to what we have here on Earth that we could understand it and relate to it. What are the odds? What do you feel the odds are that life has taken that kind of similar path somewhere in the universe?
Oh, very, very, very high. We have the observable universe and then we have the universe. And as far as we can tell right now, the universe itself is infinite, right? So
Hmm.
in a pool of infinity, it's almost impossible for us to just be the only ones. Some experiencers, some I don't want to call them abductees because they're not exactly that. Some contactees, I guess, is probably the best term.
Hmm.
Some of them describe humans. I mean, people that look just like us, but clearly they're not. They're a little bit more advanced. Some people have that theory. Some of these things are just more advanced versions of us from a different planet, but kind of born and bred the same way. Just that they have, done better than we have up till this point. Um, I think that the question needs to shift now from, is there alien life to is alien life visiting us? Are we on their radar at all? I think that anybody that thinks that there aren't other beings in the universe just don't understand exactly how large that universe is.
Yeah.
Just a matter of have they gotten here? Are they trying to make contact? I think that those are the important questions, and that's where we need to be now.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. Let me ask you this too. One of the things I feel science fiction movies have done,
Mhm.
and I'm not the biggest fan of science fiction, but I got a lot of my friends are. Some of them are filmmakers, and science fiction has inspired so many scientists, and they've done this
Sure.
and that, and that's probably true, 100% true. But I'll tell you what, the other thing they have done is they've raised this expectation of what finding life in space is going to be like. It's going to
Mhm.
be like Alien, or it's going to be
Sure.
something like ET. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know that I'll say the person who's casually interested in this really has an appreciation for, even if we could find a microbe or we could
Yeah.
find something really small, it wouldn't be as grand as, Independence Day where they're blowing up buildings. But the idea that if we could find something that was, alien in form, let's say, there's two possibilities. Well, number one, it could be something like you say that would indicate that all life in the universe is related. And that kind of gets to what you were talking about, that there could
Mhm.
be other humans out there just more advanced or something.
Sure.
And the other indication could be that life as we know it can start up any number of different ways in the
Sure.
universe. That would be the other thing. I
Mhm.
think both are kind of equally intriguing and kind of equally scary at the same time. Do you think that the public really thinks that through as much as that, or they're waiting for like a spaceship and somebody to come out and start walking around?
I don't think the public really thinks about it at all, if I'm not quite honest with you.
Yeah. Hmm.
In general, I think that if you ask the average person, one of the silly things that I kind of went through when I first got into this and started doing this full time as my job was like, what are the parents at the PTO meetings going to say, right?
Hmm.
And so I have to tell people, they'll ask, what do you do for a living? Well, I tell them. And, you'd be surprised how many people then, they're like, oh, I have this experience or I have, this thing. But on the flip side of that, you got a lot of people that are like, "Oh my god, have you ever heard about Bigfoot?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, I've never heard about that." They
Hmm.
don't understand. Average people just wake up in the morning, go to work, go home, deal with their family. They don't think about this kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah.
So that I mean, that is kind of one of my personal goals, I've got my own podcast, right? I talk about this stuff all the time. And I tell people all the time, my goal is to get people that are already into this, listen to the show. It's to get people that aren't,
Yeah.
because those are the people that we need to win over. Who cares if 30% of the world believes in UFOs? We need the other, 70% to get on board too, before we make any kind of splashes in it at all. Even with the US government trying to say, hey, listen, there might be something to all this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't even think people think about it,
I,
period.
I would agree with that because I got to tell you, I'm a little older than you are. I'm more than a little, but I can remember a time when there was a big fascination and any disclosure at all in terms of admitting that there was something going on with UFOs would have made page one news.
Mhm.
And now, you have the government admitting certain things. Now, we're not talking about admitting, there's aliens walking around, but
Sure.
they are admitting that there's things that they can't explain. There's things that
Mhm.
are happening very frequently. And there's more and more evidence coming to light that there's maybe something more to our world than what we know. And the only thing people want to talk about is Trump.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the latest person who dropped their pants on social media or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's really this indifference towards our place in the universe to me has always been very frustrating. Am I right or am I wrong there?
Oh yeah, I agree. I don't know how it doesn't blow anybody's mind. I don't know how people don't get excited about these kinds of topics. I don't know why that is. I think that just as a species now with social media and little computers in our pockets at all times, we're just, we want instant gratification and we can have it at a moment's notice. And so that doesn't really drive us to apply critical thinking. It doesn't really drive us to have to think at all. We don't have
Yeah,
to think about. I mean, gosh, if you want to make a homemade chicken noodle soup, you don't have to think about it. You just Google it. It's right there. It tells you.
yeah.
You don't even have to write down the shopping list. It's already there. You know?
That's true. And somebody brought this up, in getting back to time travel, but this
Sure.
is an excellent point. I sometimes wonder if we haven't slowed down in terms of our advancement, because here's why. This is and I'm not one to point at movies for evidence of anything, but I think this was a really good point. We're at a point in time where when Back to the Future was made in the mid 1980s, he went back to the mid 1950s.
Hmm.
And there was a stark contrast in the world in those 30 years.
Right.
The society was different. The architecture was different. Cars looked completely different. The way of life was completely different. It's like he went to not only another time, but another time that, was long ago and far different. Now we're at a time where that amount of time, 30 years from the mid 80s, we're
Hmm.
now beyond that. We're beyond that we're 30 years ahead of that.
Hmm.
And I got to tell you, if with the exception of smartphones,
Hmm.
I think if we went back 30 years, I would, if you just suddenly beamed me back to 1991, I'm not sure I would just look around and notice that, that I'm in a different place in time. The cars don't look that different. Our problems aren't any different. The politics aren't any different. It's like we're doing the same thing over and over again. How do you feel about that little observation about Back to the Future?
Um, well, I mean, honestly, I think that it could be just a matter of perception. The fact that you have lived through it and you have experienced it slowly rather than all at once. I think that if you did move back to 91, you would be a little surprised at the differences. But um, I was born in 91, so
Different
um,
perspective, yeah.
from my perspective, oh, I'm knocking over my microphone. From my perspective, this 32 years has been a long time. And I feel it's been very different. When I grew up in the technological boom. One conversation, my mom's always like, you don't remember what it's like to yada, yada, yada. I'm like, actually, I do remember that. I remember calling people on landlines and
Yeah.
not having computers at your house. And, when all my friends started driving, we had to, we didn't have to look at the old school maps. We had to map quest everything and print it out and look at that map. And, I mean, I remember a different world. As far as us slowing down, I don't think that's the case. I just think we're overstimulated with information. So
Mm.
anything new, it comes in and it's so fast until the next thing comes in. You didn't have that before. You had to sit down with the family and watch the nightly news to understand the updates of the world.
Yeah.
Or you had to look at the newspaper that, the next day, and there was only so much space for everything that can fit. Usually it was mostly local or really big stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays every hour there's something new happening within the world that you can indulge in. And I think that we just, it's not amazing to us anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Fair enough. The news that recently broke, and here again, this was on News Nation. I'm not sure about the guy's last name, David Grush, I believe.
Grush, something like that.
Yeah. His disclosure says that the United States government has been keeping this a secret a long time. That they do have ships that have either crashed or landed. And the interview asked him, did they find bodies? And he kind of danced around that. He says, well, there's kind of like pilots, that they need flown. And as I talked before, he refers to them as non-humans. And then he also refers to some of the stories that you probably know about, that these stories actually go back about 90 years, starting with Mussolini. And being in Italy, that apparently the Vatican knows some things. Your take on this recent disclosure, let's call it. What's your reaction? What's your gut instincts about this?
So I'm probably standing too close to the sun. Personally, I'm not impressed by the guy, but it's not because I think he's wrong. I think he's telling the truth. I just think that we've heard this before, and nothing ever comes out of it. I've heard it before. So one of the things that makes me is the fact that I live in Dayton, Ohio. I live right at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Which is the home for all of aerial anything. It's where Project Blue Book was. Before that we had Project Grudge and Sign, and they've been studying UFOs forever, right? I've talked to people. That work there. I've talked to everybody from janitors all the way up to intelligence officers at the NASIC building. They all tell me, they don't know each other. They all tell me the same exact thing. We have craft. We have attempted to reverse engineer the craft. The scientists there put it down because they realize that they don't know what they're doing, and they're kind of intimidated by the fact that here's all this material that we don't really know what it does. We don't really know how it works.
Yeah.
Even to the point of allegedly people say that, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is really, really haunted. I've had these people come to me and say, no, it's not haunted. Do you know what it is? It's the technology there that makes it seem like it is.
Interesting.
It's causing weird things to go on. And again, these are people that don't know each other. They don't, and what do they have to gain from it? I guess just talking to me, I suppose. And hey, that's a treat. So I don't know. But I have an older gentleman. He's very sick, and he worked at the base in the 60s. And the reason why I met this gentleman was because a friend that I gone to high school with, it was his grandfather. And, he said, hey, when I was a kid, my grandpa used to tell me stories about an alien that they kept in the basement of the base. And they used to call him Bob. And he, just kind of told him stories. And as he got older, the grandfather kind of stopped talking about it. Well, once the grandfather got really sick, he decided that, guess what? He wanted to talk about it. And, then you get in all kinds of stuff with the family, like, well, how much of this do you guys want out there? Do you want to come out and talk about it? Do you want him to come out and talk about it? You guys have to live with it afterwards, And, I don't know. His claims might not be real, but when you add it up to all these other people saying the same thing over and over and over again, how could it not?
Yeah.
And it's the same old thing. Guess what? We had a being, it lived there. It was only alive for a couple of months. It died. It couldn't live on the planet. We didn't know how to take care of it. We tried. We couldn't. But then again, you're talking species of these, this extraterrestrial life that's so intelligent that they were able to board planes to physically come here. Why are they crashing them? Gosh, that's a grave mistake, logically, skeptically, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
You know, yeah,
But
that's one of the things I've always said. They always say their technology is so advanced, they can dive through wormholes, they can transcend
yeah,
to space and time, they can skip dimensions. They just can't fly across New Mexico.
but they get hit by a lightning bolt and they're trash, you know? I mean, I don't I agree with that. One thing that people have considered, and I don't know, I don't know if it's true or not, but people consider that these are not these aren't actual biological beings. They're some type of drone, they're some type of worker bee. And so when it crashes here, the actual species that sent whatever it is doesn't really care. It's just equipment.
Yeah,
They just kind of leave it. And it's not like we're going to come to them and be like, hey, you can't be flying around our planet because we can't find them. So
yeah,
maybe that's it. Maybe they're not biological. Maybe they're meant to shut down if captured. Who
yeah.
knows?
Well, the other question that I would have is because the interviewer more or less asked him that about
Hmm.
the crashing and all that, and his
Right.
answer was, "Well, we have technological, highly sophisticated airplanes, and they crash and everything."
Yeah.
And I suppose that's an answer, but what I don't understand is why these things always crash in areas where only the government can find them. I don't understand why one hasn't crashed in Central Park.
Yeah.
you know, where it's surrounded by millions of people, and New York, probably some of the best media, best cameras in the world. They never happen there. They always happen somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's the part that really throws me. That all these countries have these secrets, and by the way, all these countries hate each other.
Right.
They're
Yes.
they're willing to throw nuclear weapons at each other, but they're all in total agreement that we got to keep this UFO thing quiet. That just doesn't add up to me. How do you feel about that?
I agree. Totally. I mean, and that's again, it's what makes me controversial at my job is because I'm actually good at it. But you know, I, I don't believe in the grand conspiracy. I do
Hmm.
believe that pieces of something somewhere a couple of times have been caught up. It's not happening constantly because again, advanced species, right?
Yeah,
Maybe they do come out and they don't quite understand our weather patterns and they get swept up by a tornado. I don't know. You do have regular everyday people that collect these things and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know. It's not like you can call Ghostbusters and we'll come out and help you out.
yeah,
They contact the military, the government, the police that then contact the military. I can believe that happening sometimes, every so often. But I agree, there's no grand conspiracy. The people that I've talked to all say the same thing. The government knows a little bit more than we do, not much. They do have things, not much, but that's why they won't come out and disclose fully what it is because, like we've noticed when COVID happened, people freak the fuck out when we tell them we don't know.
yeah,
They don't like that. And so they just don't talk about it. And I think that probably happens with, other governments. We did an episode on the podcast on the, we what did we talk about? The Virginia, which is basically Brazil's Roswell.
okay,
And one of the things that was talks about in it was that it was U.S. pilots that came and collected trash debris and bodies. And it's like, why would we do that? Why wouldn't Brazil keep that? Unless there was like maybe some monetary gain to it, right? Brazil's calling
hmm,
everybody going, hey, we got UFOs and aliens. We'll take the highest bidder and give it to you. I mean, I don't know, but why would they?
yeah,
It just kind of makes the US sound a little bit more important than it actually is, um, which I think is kind of culturally something that as an American, we kind of grow up with a lot.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't think there's like a grand, big cover up. I don't think that they're speaking with these beings at all. Or if they are, it's as much as anybody else. I'm trying to make contact. I'm getting very little, not enough to substantiate any evidence. But I think that people hate to hear that because then that, at least with the government backing behind it, they feel a little bit more protected.
hmm.
But that's the part about it. We just honestly we have no idea what we're dealing with, and at the end of the day, I think that's all it is.
We have been talking to Asherz. You can find her on Twitter at It's Asherz, and that's
Mhm.
ASHERS.
It's a Z,
The
E or
What's that?
Z. It's
Yeah,
ASHE or
I
Z. Yeah,
I apologize.
that's okay.
ASHERZ, and I probably need to clean my glasses. That's probably the problem. Uh, she is also a podcaster, and Wednesdays Talk at Wednesdays Talk is where you can find that on Twitter. I did listen to it, prior to having you on. It
Smart.
sounds absolutely great. I mean, it does.
Thank you.
You want to tell the audience just a little bit about your podcast, because you are an interesting person, and you have that youthful enthusiasm,
Oh,
and it makes you very interesting to listen to, and you're very open minded. So it's great to listen to you. You want to tell us a little bit about the podcast? Is there somebody else on there with you? Correct?
yeah. So the show's called On Wednesdays We Talk Weird, because there's a new episode every Wednesday. It's hosted by myself, and I have a co-host, Pat O'Sullivan. Pat is he's a filmmaker from Chicago, but he does actual fiction and things like that. But Pat himself is an experiencer. He saw aliens in his home as a child. So having that perspective on there, while having myself, it helps. And then we both think we're really funny. We're probably not, but we think we are. And it is a comedy show. And, again, like I mentioned earlier, the reason for that is because I'm trying to attract people to the show who aren't into this stuff, and one of the ways that you connect with people is through comedy. And, I just want people to realize that, people like myself, we're not nuts. We're just people,
Sure.
and so we're just trying to kind of relate to the masses. But yeah, we do, every week we pick a topic, or, we'll have a guest on every once in a while. We'll cover kind of relevant, weird news that's happening. Pat might share a story about his weekend.
Yeah.
But it's, I try to deliver as much information as I can. I mean, these aren't just like, you see some YouTubers and things like that, and they're like, is this story real? I'll never do that. Actually sometimes it's kind of sad and disappointing, because we'll deep dive a topic and come to find out it's just all bullshit. But but I try. And that's the important part, is that I want people to trust what I'm saying. So when I say, guys, there's something to this, you should be paying attention, my listeners can trust that and really start paying attention.
That's fantastic, and there's probably a lot of weird stories to talk about these days. I was with somebody not too long ago, and they made the observation. It's kind of hard. You have the Onion and the Babylon Bee. It's kind of hard to tell the headlines in those from the real ones. They're almost interchangeable.
Exactly. Yep. That's well, and and we're fans. We talk about it all the time. We were fans of the Weekly World News growing up. I love it. And I love Bat Boy, but Bat Boy is not real, and so, but you can have fun with it. I mean, and I say that, some things, I have a professional opinion and a personal opinion. The Loch Ness Monster, it's not a plesiosaur. It can't be. I know it can't be, because scientifically we have neck bones of the plesiosaur, and it can't crane. But God damn it, I want it to be a plesiosaur. So that's what I'm going to choose to believe in, and that's the difference between the professional opinion and the personal opinion. And I try to make it very clear, which is which, because at the end of the day, we were just weirdo black sheep kids who now are making a career of it. So
that's fantastic. And I hope you make your way around to being on the show again. You've been great to have. Once again, on Twitter, you can find her. It's Asherz, and that's ITSASHERZ. And Wednesdays Talk is where you can find her podcast on Twitter. Now, what platforms are you available on? Could if they want to find the podcast, and they go to like Apple Podcast, do they just search Wednesdays Talk, or what's the best way to find it?
So it would be On Wednesdays We Talk Weird, anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's the only thing that comes up when you Google it. So it's pretty easy to find. And if you can't find that, come find me on Twitter, or Instagram at It's Asherz. You guys can also add me on Facebook if you really want to. Ashley Hilt. I'm the one with the red hair. You can't miss me. So
awesome. Well, it's been a delight having you. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My name is Billy Dees. And I'll tell you what, you can find me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees on Twitter. And you can tweet me, follow me. I always just say you just have to be nice. That's all I ask. And you can find the Billy Dees podcast anywhere you find podcasts. And if you do search me on social media, I'm on most platforms. I'm not totally active on all of them all of the time, because it's just way too time consuming. I would have to say that easiest way to find me, Billy Dees, on most platforms. And Twitter's kind of like my social media home. I have links in my bio, and you can you can search me out there. Thank you very much for listening today. I really appreciate it, and we will talk to you again next week. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter @Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.